3 months ago, Curtis Blaydes and Derrick Lewis were set to square off in a heavyweight main event that had immediate implications for the UFC title picture. The fight was called off about a week away from fight night when Blaydes tested positive for COVID-19, promoting Anthony Smith versus Devin Clark to headliner status and postponing the meeting of Razor and the Black Beast. This weekend, the two heavyweight contenders will finally meet up, and the stakes are much the same as they would have been last November. Namely, while the winner of this Saturday's main event might have to wait his turn behind Francis Ngannou and probably John Jones, he will probably have earned a shot at whoever is holding the title once those two have had their turn and reigning champ Stipe Miocic has had his say. Good evening and welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 185, Blaydes vs. Lewis, also known as UFC Vegas 19. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and with me is Keith Schillen, executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Network, as well as a writer for Sherdog.com and a host and creator of numerous shows for Sherdog Radio, including MMA Past, Present, and Future, and of course the Schillen and Duffy Show. Keith, how are you this evening?
I'm good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Got my power back on. Those who don't know, I live in Houston, Texas, where over 2 million people were without power 2 nights ago. I was one of them. My house got what we like to say in technical terms, fucking cold. It was about 56 degrees in the warmest room in my house by the time my power came back on. I literally I took all my freezer food and threw it on the back porch, took all my fridge food and threw it in the garage, and it was all perfectly fine. It was really damn cold here.
Yeah, and right away when you say 56 degrees, I think of all those like tough guys who be like, "There's not even that cold. I live in an insert cold area." Listen, if you think that, don't be a prick. There's like some people are gonna die from this, so don't be a prick.
Yeah, and the thing is, I can understand where they're coming from because I grew up on the East Coast in an area that got a lot of snow. I spent a lot of my adult life living in the Rocky Mountains in Salt Lake City, and I was the dude who'd go out and shovel his driveway in basketball shorts. Be like, this is great. But there's a difference between being a knucklehead for half an hour, knowing that you're going to go inside, take a hot shower, and have some cocoa, versus just sitting there. It's getting colder. You can't really move and do much, so you're not generating any heat. And most importantly, you don't know when it's going to get warm again. You know, it's the same way that you haven't really been hungry until you don't know where your next meal is coming from. Like, there's a difference in being cold when you don't know when it ends. It sucked. Even as someone who's lived cold places, like that was not a pleasant experience. And literally millions of people had it worse than me or continue to have it worse than me. So, my thoughts are with them. Thank you. With that out of the way, we got 15 fights tonight.
Sorry to interrupt you. What is funny that we got the guy who lives in Texas and the guy in New England, and we're talking about how you lost power from snowstorms, not the guy from New England.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's been something. We got 15 fights. I don't know if this card is stacked from a talent standpoint or a standpoint of divisional relevance, but it is just stacked with fights. There's a lot of fights, 15 fights. It will tie, whichever card it was last year for the most fights on a UFC card, assuming they all make it through weigh-ins and make it into the cage. I'm just going to come out and say it. There's not a whole lot of good stuff on this card. There aren't that many fights that have big implications for their division, obviously, other than the main event. There aren't too many where I even go, oh, that's definitely going to be a banger. Let me ask you this. What's the fight on this card that you are second most interested in seeing? And that's assuming that Blaydes versus Lewis is number one. I mean, if that's not the case.
Yeah, it's probably still, we already made our predictions weeks ago. I'm not changing my prediction. So, I'm not, it matters in the ranking. So I would still put it number one, but I'm very confident in my pick in that one. I would probably go the Phil Hawes fight. That might be the next most intriguing, in a prospect sense. I'm also interested in the two aging heavyweights versus the two young heavyweights. That's a little intriguing. But overall, I agree with you. This is like a Ponderosa or a Golden Corral like buffet. Like the food isn't that good, but there's a lot of food. So fill up your plate with some chicken wings and some mashed potatoes and go to town.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would be tempted to say Drakkar Klose versus Luis Pena, just because whoever wins that has the potential to kind of be a ranked fighter in a couple of fights. But what kills me on that one is it's probably going to be a miserable fight to watch. So it's almost less more like medicine than food. It's like I know this is important, but I'm not going to enjoy it. But we can talk about that more when we get to that. But
it's the salad bar part of Ponderosa. Like,
yeah,
you throw the salad on there, but you don't really want to eat the salad when you're at the buffet.
no, it's and like going to Ponderosa with my parents, and they'd make me like add the soup and the salad before I could just go over to the like prime rib carving station and
Wait a minute, you had prime rib at your Ponderosas?
I grew up in a pretty wealthy suburb. Maybe that's not every Ponderosa. Who knows?
There you go.
Shout outs to Gaithersburg, Maryland. All right.
There you go.
With that, let's dig into the buffet. The UFC Vegas 19 prelims kick off with a heavyweight matchup between Sergey Spivak and the debuting Jared Vanderaa. Spivak, the 26-year-old from Moldova, is 11-2 overall, 2-2 since joining the UFC in 2019. He fought most recently last July, taking a majority decision over Carlos Felipe at UFC Fight Night Figueiredo versus Benavidez 2. He'll be taking on Jared the Mountain Vanderaa. The 28-year-old is 11-4 overall. He fought most recently on Dana White's Contender Series back in November, knocking out Harry Hunsucker in the first round. He makes his UFC debut off the strength of that win. Spivak is a comfortable favorite here, available around minus 250, where Vanderaa is out there plus 210, plus 215 or so. This has to be a first. This has to be the first fight between two UFC heavyweights that both fought their way into the UFC off of beating Tony Lopez. Now, I like Tony Lopez. I've watched more King of the Cage than any human who is not employed by King of the Cage probably has. But Tony Lopez is 47 years old. Spivak beat him 2 years ago. Vanderaa beat him a year ago. And that was both their last wins before joining either the UFC or going to Dana White's Contender Series. That is a scathing indictment of the quality of the UFC heavyweight division right now. That's what it takes. Like, you've just got to convincingly beat a 45, 46-year-old journeyman who his record, I'm not looking at it, but he's probably like 50-30 right now. Yeah. And I mean, he's not even the King of the Cage champ anymore. And that's what it takes to get into the UFC. That's a little depressing. I've been underestimating Spivak since he got to the UFC. I saw a not very big guy who's an okay athlete and is okay at just about everything. And I still feel that way. But again, it's an indictment of the UFC's heavyweight division that's been enough for him to get to 2-2 in the UFC. And I'm favoring him to get to 3-2 because Jared Vanderaa, from what I've seen of him, he is only good at one thing, and that thing is being huge. He has a bunch of knockouts on his record, but it's just big man power. He's not that sharp a striker. He was eating a lot of strikes on the Contender Series until just he overwhelmed the guy. He hit him more, he hit him harder. But I don't see Jared Vanderaa making a splash in the UFC at all. I don't know if I'm a believer in Spivak, but I think Spivak has all kinds of routes to victory here. He is a niftier boxer than Vanderaa. While he's going to be a lot smaller in the cage, I wouldn't be surprised if their difference in actual weight once they step in there is going to be on the order of like 30 or 35 pounds, because Vanderaa, he cuts to make 265. Spivak walks around 238. But I think Spivak could probably wrestle him and even get him down. I also think that if this goes past the first round, Vanderaa's gas tank is going to be the one that betrays him. Spivak, kind of like that fighter that you make in a video game and he's got a 5 or in everything. His gas tank is okay when he doesn't have Marcin Tybura laying on top of him for 3 rounds. It's been decent otherwise. Give me Spivak, and Give me Spivak by third round TKO. He wears Vanderaa down and either takes him down or busts him up on the feet in the third round. Give me Sergey Spivak by third round TKO.
All right, so we get the battle of the two legendary fighters students. We have Fedor Emelianenko's student and Sergey Spivak, and Dan Henderson's student and Jad Vanderaa. So this is a fight that was supposed to be scheduled before. We actually previewed this. So all I did was just transfer my notes from the last time. So if you don't want to listen to what I said again, and you've already heard it, fast forward, I guess. I'll start with Spivak. He's on the feet, flat-footed. A little flat-footed, but he's got a pretty decent jab. He pieced up Carlos Felipe with just his jab. He throws straight punches down the pipe. You got to like that. Throws some kicks, though I wouldn't say he's a kicker. Defensively, he kind of just pillars, kind of covers and pillars. Good takedowns, solid entries. He loves a single leg. If you get in the clinch, he can go upper body too, lateral drop. Or will just kind of push you against the cage and grind against you on the fence. Also, if he's on top, he's more of a ground and pounder than a submission threat, though he can get some subs. Vanderaa trains under Dan Henderson. I know he's also trained with Dominic Reyes. He was a training partner. I can't remember which fight he was like a main training partner, Dominic Reyes. He's also flat-footed. He's slow, pretty unathletic. Similar to Spivak, he kind of works behind a jab. Though he loses his punching power because he pulled his head back. He also struggled to check kicks in one of his regional fights against Renan Ferreira. Ferreira was kind of piecing up his legs with that. He wants to get to the clinch where he can dirty box, kind of very similar to Dan Henderson, pull down on the back of the head and kind of land some uppercuts. He's an okay wrestler at best. Looks for not a guy who enters on the hips. He's more of an upper body locks, trips, weak takedown defense. I'll give him credit. He's got a good chin, as you mentioned. Like, he gets hit a lot, so that's how you know he's got a good chin. And I'll give him credit. Like, he won his Contender Series matchup by just having a deeper gas tank, just kept moving forward. The thing that really probably worries me about Vanderaa is just I've seen some interviews with him, and he has some of the weirdest interviews ever. Like, he seems like he already has like CTE is great, like his little like Diego Sanchez in him. Both guys are really low level, but I'm going to take the guy that I've seen win in the UFC before. Not to mention Vanderaa has, on the Contender Series, he was beaten up on the feet really by like a very low level guy that was taking the fight on 3 days' notice. So you went with Spivak by third round TKO, which was originally my pick. So I'm going to change mine to a second round TKO for Spivak.
There you go. 2 picks for Sergey Spivak to go over 500 in the UFC. Next up, it's a bantamweight scrap between Aiemann Zahabi and Drako Rodriguez. Zahabi, the younger brother of TriStar MMA head honcho Firas Zahabi, is 33 years old. He is 7-2 overall. He is 1-2 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, having lost to Vince Morales back in May of 2019. Previous to that, he lost to Ricardo Ramos back at UFC 217 all the way back in November of 2017. He'll be taking on Rodriguez, who is making his UFC debut. The 24-year-old is 7-1 overall. He fought on Dana White's Contender Series last September. Rodriguez, despite being the less experienced and the debuting fighter, is a slight favorite. He is around minus 170 right now, where Zahabi is available at plus 150 as the underdog. Keith, how do you see this one breaking down?
Well, again, this is the second fight in a row that we've already previewed this one as they were supposed to previously fight, and I'm just gonna go right off my my notes again last time. First way, Zahabi, as you mentioned, hasn't fought in so long, so it's really hard to have a grasp on him as he's been so inactive. I think he's fought twice in the last 3 years. When he fights, he has some solid boxing, but he kind of fights in bursts. He's your typical TriStar guy. Jab is his best weapon. Loves his basic 1-2 combo. Showed, I would say, stinging power against Hakado almost, but not like fight-ending power. Lacks volume, throws one fight, should be one strike at a time. Lacks head movement. Kicks are good, but he doesn't really throw them enough. Kind of everything with Zahabi when I've watched him. He also doesn't check leg kicks. He is solid in the clinch and will get into takedown, which is nice. A nice added tool to a guy who's kind of known for his striking. Though I wouldn't say he's a powerful wrestler. He's more of a like surprising wrestler. And I would say his takedown defense is kind of weak. Though he's pretty good at winning scrambles, and he is a submission threat off his back or on top. Move over to Rodriguez. Now, Rodriguez is a lot different than Zahabi, where he's very aggressive. He seems like he has a lot of fun. He's smiling. He'll stick his tongue out. He kind of likes to taunt. He's got some pro boxing experience, though he isn't technically sound. Again, very similar, very different than Zahabi. He can be wild, but he makes up with just pressure. He likes coming forward. He doesn't like being backed up. So if Zahabi can kind of jab him up and back him up with that, that's a way to beat him. He's a solid wrestler. He likes his body lock takedowns. He's also pretty good in the scramble, good ground and pound. He has been taken down by weaker wrestlers, though. And he makes it worse because he'll like to jump the guillotine, which is, while, yes, it works a lot of times, it always puts people in a bad position. That said, I want to take Rodriguez simply because he's been more active. I think he has more power. I think he's maybe the better offensive wrestler. I don't think he'll get a stoppage, so I'll say Rodriguez wins by decision in a close fight.
Funny thing about Zahabi is he definitely has that TriStar look in that, well, not just because he looks like Faraz, but he has the look of a TriStar fighter in that, yeah, definitely the jab is his best weapon, his kind of go-to tool. But he's also a little more reckless, I think, than your average TriStar fighter, at least on the feet, which is the thing that's strange to me, because I think of TriStar as a place where fighters will go and they will become very conservative in the stand-up. You think of your obviously George St. Pierre is the most obvious example, but a lot of people have gone there and just become much more kind of buttoned up and conservative strikers. And the one guy that has a little bit of a wild side is a little open defensively, will try to throw a spinning back elbow sometimes. It's the head coach's younger brother. Go figure. However, he's not as reckless on the ground, I don't think. And that works in his favor because that's where Rodriguez's biggest advantages, I think, are going to be. I expect that Rodriguez will probably be the better wrestler here. I think he's going to be the better athlete here. I really don't know what to make of Zahabi because he's been so inactive recently. Like, I remember him taking that spinning back elbow loss way back in 2017, and I was shocked that it was November 2017, that it was over 3 years ago at this point. He's fought twice in the last 3 years and change. He's not looked that great either time, and he's in a phase, just age-wise, that a lot of bantamweights are falling off, even if they're active, and he hasn't been. So I'm kind of fading Zahabi even more than I would be otherwise. I think he's going to lose to Rodriguez. I don't know if he's going to get finished. I'm going to go by decision here, but I wouldn't be surprised if it just turns out that Zahabi's game has really eroded in the year and a half since his last fight, and he ends up getting finished. But I'm not going to pick it. I am going to pick Rodriguez by decision. We now move to the featherweight division, where Chaz Skelly and Jamall Emmers will square off. Skelly, the 35-year-old, is 18-3 with one no contest overall. He is 7-3 with one no contest in the UFC. He fought most recently all the way back in September of 2019, taking a unanimous decision victory over Jordan Griffin at UFC Fight Night Cowboy versus Gaethje. Emmers, the 31-year-old Californian, is 18-5 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He joined the UFC last year out of Legacy Fighting Alliance. He lost a split decision in his debut to Giga Chikadze back at UFC 248. Then he came back in August and won a unanimous decision over Vince Cachero at UFC Fight Night Brunson versus Shabazian. Emmers is a pretty comfortable favorite here. He is out there around minus 240. Skelly is available around plus 210 as the underdog. Keith, who do you see winning this one and how?
So this is one of the more competitive fights on the card because I think both guys, I wouldn't say are high level, but they're well rounded. Like they both have skills. They don't have a major weakness. Skelly has a lot of injuries. Like he's been battling injuries, so he's kind of like I kind of forgot about him a little bit. He's a big featherweight, not a great athlete. I said both guys are well rounded. I should have said about Skelly. Like his stand up is actually kind of ugly. His punches and kicks are slow. He can get a little wild with it. He backs up straight on the center line, but he's like toughness will keep him into it. So I guess he is well rounded. Just like he makes up for just by being a tough dude. He likes to wrestle and he likes to wrestle a lot. He sometimes will shoot without setting it up, which would be very hard to take down a guy like Emmers if he doesn't set up his takedowns. But he's more of a funk wrestler than an explosive wrestler. Like he's good at, just closing the distance enough to cause a scramble and winning the scramble. And he's good like submission threat. He's got good back takes. He's got 10 submission wins on his record. And he's a funk style guy, as in the fact like he can put himself in a bad position. I mean, Jordan Griffin, who's not really known for being a great wrestler or a great grappler, actually mounted him in, I think it was his last fight, the Jordan Griffin one. Now moving to Emmers. Emmers, the guy who came up with the Contender Series. I liked him on the Contender Series. I actually picked him to win. I think he lost to Julian Erosa. He's well rounded. He's also big for the weight class. Back straight up when he's getting attacked, which I don't like, but he does have good output on the feet. Fast hands, accurate hands. He's pretty fluid, works behind a jab. His right hand is accurate. He throws a lot of kicks, especially to the body. He loves stepping knees if you get in too close. His plum clinch is very good. We'll just lock on and just kind of start blasting away with knees. I would say his best game, though, is probably his wrestling. He chains takedowns together well, which is very different than Skelly. Like Skelly wants to just cause a scramble. Emmers is explosive, get in the hips, and if he doesn't get the single, he'll blast off to a double. Like he's very good at chaining his takedowns together. And he had one of the really, really slick submission of Rafael Barboza in LFA with a head and arm triangle choke. Skelly's a tough out for anybody. He's a crafty veteran. That says Emmers has a much, much higher ceiling. Plus, Skelly has dealt with a lot of injuries. I think Emmers is just better in every position. I say he picks apart Skelly on the feet, and he at least matches him in the grappling. So give me Emmers. I don't think he stops him because, like I talked about how tough Skelly is. So give me Emmers by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you on Emmers having a really high ceiling. In preparing to talk about this fight, I went back and watched his fight with Giga Chikadze, and while I did score it for Chikadze both in the moment and when watching it again, he gave him a harder time than anyone else in the UFC has, and Chikadze is in that top 3 or 4 hottest new guys in the UFC. I think, well, if Emmers keeps going, those two will probably meet again down the line with much higher stakes because they both look like future top 10 contenders in this division to me. Skelly, he is a tough veteran. He's a tough out. I still don't think he's ever been submitted. The only question is how he looks after all that time off. After as you mentioned, he's been injured a lot in like the last 5 years or so in particular, and whether if he is like fully healthy and he's the same Chaz Skelly he was back in fall of 2019, if he's a little too much too soon for Emmers, who, even though Emmers is a 20-fight veteran and he's over 30, he still has the feel of somebody who's refining his game and kind of shoring up his weaknesses. I do think this is Emmers' time. Give me Emmers to kind of outclass Skelly everywhere. I don't think Skelly's approach to wrestling, both offensively and defensively, is going to get him any headway against Emmers. If Emmers wants it to stay on the feet, it's going to stay on the feet. And if it goes to the ground, it's going to go there on Emmers' terms, and it's not going to end up in the kind of situations where Skelly's going to be able to find the front headlocks, to like guillotines and anaconda chokes, or, back takes and rear naked chokes that he likes. And because Skelly has been out, for quite a while, we don't know what he's going to look like physically. He's 35 now, which, again, kind of like I said about Aiemann Zahabi at bantamweight, Skelly as a 35-year-old featherweight, a division where speed kills, this is typically a time when a lot of good fighters are starting to fall off physically. Because of that, I am going to pick Emmers to get the finish here. Give me Emmers by third round, probably TKO, just mauling him in the clinch and maybe chasing him down to the ground. Certainly could grab some kind of sub down there, but I haven't seen Skelly sub before. I have seen him stop with strikes, so give me Emmers by third round TKO. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 185 prelims, it is the flyweights, as fan favorite Shana Dobson welcomes the undefeated and highly regarded prospect Casey O'Neill to the octagon. Dobson, the 31-year-old Texan, is 4-4 overall. She is 2-3 in the UFC. She fought most recently back in August of 2020, where she snapped a 3-fight losing streak and notched what I believe is the biggest upset in UFC history, or was at the time the biggest upset in UFC history, when she knocked out Maria Agapova in the second round of their matchup. She'll be welcoming O'Neill, the 23-year-old Australian. O'Neill is a perfect 5-0, the first 4 fights of that record taking place in Australian mainstay Eternal MMA. She switched over to Abu Dhabi Warriors late last year, and she won her debut there by second round knockout over Christina Stelio. Perhaps moving to the United Arab Emirates drew the attention of the UFC. Maybe she was on their radar anyway, but either way, she is making her debut here. She is also favored to win that debut, currently sitting around minus 150 as the favorite, where Dobson is available around plus 125, plus 130 as an underdog. I'm excited for Casey O'Neill in the UFC. She is physically a for real flyweight. She's tall and rangy, but she's not skinny. She's pretty strong. She can do a little of everything. She's a good striker. She identifies as coming out of Tiger Muay Thai, but she's not really a Muay Thai style fighter. And I would even say that her ground game is probably her best skill set right now. And it's definitely the skill set where she will probably have the best advantage in this fight. Dobson's a good kickboxer. She throws punches in combination. She has pretty good power. She at least has more of a gas tank than Maria Agapova. So there's that. I'm tempted to take Dobson in this one just as being a little too much too soon, and, well, having the experience at kind of embarrassing the highly touted prospect. But I don't think it's going to happen. O'Neill, she appears to have a fine gas tank, which was the problem with Agapova. She came out like a house on fire in the first round and just completely gassed herself out. I don't think O'Neill will do that. And I don't think Dobson has any one skill set that's going to give O'Neill much pause. Give me Casey O'Neill in a pretty one-sided decision. O'Neill by decision. I'm not a coming out party. This is not going to be a highlight reel fight. I don't expect her to even probably threaten to finish Dobson here. Dobson is definitely a step up from the women O'Neill was fighting back in Australia. But, yeah, O'Neill by a pretty easy decision.
All right. You didn't want to take Shana Dobson to be on a 2-fight winning streak. Shana Dobson, she's not very athletic, as I think you mentioned. She is a boxer, though she kind of lacks power. She's not a big hitter. She keeps her head on the center line, very hittable. She will sneak in a takedown. She did it against Agapova, though she's a terrible defensive wrestler herself. I'll give her credit. She will throw up submissions off her back, though she won't have to get it. And while, yeah, she pulled off this huge upset against Agapova, and I think you mentioned it's the biggest betting underdog in history. I want to throw it out there to the listeners. We're not saying it's the biggest upset in UFC history. Like, I think Matt Serra's knockout of George St. Pierre is. He means betting wise, like pure according to Vegas.
Numerically.
Yeah. I can't get past the fact that Agapova was absolutely dominating her until the comeback came. So I'm still not too excited about Dobson. Like, Agapova lost that fight. I don't think Dobson won it. Now move over to O'Neal. I haven't seen much film on her. I'm not going to pretend like I have, but I've only seen 2 of her fights. I love that she's 23. Like, that's always the thing that jumps out to me. You mentioned that she trains at Tiger Muay Thai, but might not. Either way, if she's been training at all at Tiger Muay Thai, that's always a good thing. You know how well that they do, especially, grooming fighters. We saw like how good the stand-up of Ian Heinisch looked after he won training camp, and Khalil Roundtree. From what I've seen her on the feet, she is a Muay Thai stylist. Like, on the feet, she fights like a Muay Thai fighter, though she is very raw, not close to a finished product. She's a high-volume striker, fast hands, pretty accurate, though she keeps her chin kind of high. I agree with you. She's a better grappler, but she's not a wrestler. Her takedowns are kind of ugly. She kind of reaches a little bit, but if she gets you down, she is a solid grappler. She's got some good ground and pound, and she is a submission threat. I think she got 1 submission early in her pro career. She got a couple as an amateur. Dobson has way more high level experience. She might be the better wrestler. However, I know she isn't good. I'm just going to strictly go with the unknown of O'Neal. O'Neal is young, so she has so much room for growth, and like setting the bar at Shana Dobson isn't that high to get over. So I'll agree with you. I'll take O'Neal by decision also.
Next up, it is a battle of debuting featherweights as Rafael Alves and Pat Sabatini prepare to square off. Alves, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is 19-9 overall. He fought on Dana White's Contender Series last August, choking out Alejandro Flores with a second-round guillotine choke. He'll be taking on the debuting Pat Sabatini, who steps in on short notice for Mike Trezano, who was forced to withdraw from the fight. Sabatini, 30 years old as well, is 13-3 overall. He fought most recently back on December 18th against Jesse Stern in Cage Fury Fighting Championships, winning by second-round armbar. If the name Sabatini rings a bell to you and you are the type who follows regional MMA, it may be ringing a bell because last February he chose to snap instead of tap and lost by a first-round armbar where his arm just completely came apart. One of the more gruesome injuries of last year. Frankly surprised that he recovered in time to fight twice more last year. And, hey, he has now made it to the UFC on short notice. Alves is a slight favorite, sitting around minus 190. Sabatini is out there at plus 160 or plus 165. How do you feel about this one, Keith?
So this is actually one of the more intriguing fights, even though it was kind of thrown together last minute. Alves is a Contender Series guy, very athletic, has a capoeira style to his game. He fights from both stances, which kind of makes it even more unpredictable. He loves spinning attacks. He loves flying knees. He'll throw in like a jumping high kick. He's just, that capoeira style. Fast hands. He throws everything hard. Though he can be aggressive at times, he has a Yoel Romero style to him where he'll kind of dart in range and throw a blitz, but then suddenly he'll take huge moments of time off. And he did fight much different in his Contender Series matchup. He was a lot more reserved in his attack. Wasn't throwing that capoeira stuff. He's also been rocked multiple times in fights due to being super aggressive. That's going to happen. He's a good wrestler, though. He's a lot of his takedowns come from throws. Like, I tried to look. I don't know if he has a judo background, but he has like a lot of high level throws. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a submission threat. He likes to attack the neck. Your guillotines, your rear naked chokes, your Darce chokes, your Peruvian neckties. He also got a submission on the Contender Series with the guillotine. If you put him on his back, he'll look to sweep, or he'll like to look for submissions off the back, kind of scramble, look for a leg lock. Though, and I feel like I say this all the time, broken record, he will look to play BJJ off his back instead of scrambling, which I don't like. Moving to Sabatini, I wouldn't call him a great athlete, but I'd say he's a plus athlete. Has a karate style, has that wide stance. Also similar to his opponent, he likes spinning attacks. His conventional boxing needs some improvement, though he does have some decent pop. I mean, he hurt his last opponent on the feet. I also like that he targets the body and he throws a lot of kicks. But he isn't. I wouldn't say he's a polished boxer. Good wrestler, not a great wrestler. Like he'll shoot him for an entry, but he's not. He's not Josh Koscheck. He's not going to run you through the cage. More of a grinder, like willing to close the distance, grind against the fence. He is a submission threat, but again, like when I think of Sabatini, nothing jumps out at me about him. This is a close fight, but I'm going to go with Alves. He has a speed advantage. He might also be the better grappler. Plus, Sabatini's taking this fight on very short notice, so like a lot of things are going against him. So give me Alves by, I'm going to say, I don't know. It's going to be a bad night if this keeps happening, but I'm going to say Alves by decision.
Awesome. Even if these two were meeting off of full training camps and preparing for each other, I would probably favor Alves. I'm surprised to see Rafael Alves in the UFC at all. There was a time in his career where he was not a good fighter, and he was losing to a lot of bad fighters. He would always have flashes of cool stuff on offense, but just for a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, he was just strangely hapless on the ground. And for one thing, he may not have been a black belt at the time. Maybe he's concentrated on that more in more recent years, but just would lose to like jobber, like 500 fighters, and just, would just get tapped out. He's really gotten this game together in the last few years. It is, as you say, partly by toning back the crazy capoeira stuff a little bit. Generally now when his fights go to the ground, it's because he wants it there and it gets there the way he wants it to get there. It's not somebody just, grabbing one of his like crazy spin kicks and tussling him to the floor. I think he's probably going to turn out to be better everywhere than Sabatini once they square off. Even though Sabatini is a guy that probably would have made it to the UFC or at least the Contender Series on his own steam this year anyway. I think Alves, this is going to end up being a showcase for him in the way a fight against Mike Trezano probably wouldn't have been. Give me Alves, and if he decides that he wants to like uncork his crazy spinning stuff, he could end up getting a performance of the night, kind of highlight reel knockout over Sabatini. I am going to pick him to finish Sabatini anyway, who fought fairly recently, but is taking this fight on very short notice. And he looks like a pretty big and sturdy featherweight who probably has to cut a decent amount of weight. For all those reasons, give me Alves, and give me Alves by third round TKO. We will stay in the featherweight division as Nate Landwehr takes on Julian Erosa. Landwehr, the 32-year-old, is 14-3 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently last May, taking a unanimous decision over Darren Elkins at UFC on ESPN 8. Before that, he was knocked out in the first round by Herbert Burns back last January at UFC Fight Night Blaydes versus Dos Santos. He takes on Erosa. The 31-year-old is 24-8. He is 2-4 in the UFC across 3 different stints with the promotion. He is that rarity, a fighter who has been signed by the UFC 3 different times, and even rarer, he is, off the top of my head, he might be the only fighter who's joined the UFC off of The Ultimate Fighter, then off of Dana White's Contender Series, and then via just a normal signing out of a regional promotion. Nonetheless, he fought most recently back in June, where he upsets a pretty highly touted prospect in Sean Woodson, outlasting and exhausting him and finally finishing him with a Bravo choke in the third round of their fight at UFC on ESPN 12. The two are close to a pick'em right now. Erosa sitting around minus 115, Landwehr minus 105. Keith, who have you got in this one?
That's a good question, man, because this is the fight I keep flip-flopping to the point where looking at my notes, I actually changed things that popping up in my head about them, and I changed my pick about 3 times during the introduction. So that's how close this fight is to me. I'll start with Erosa. He's got lots of experience. He has 32 professional fights. He's very tall. He's long and lengthy. He's 76-inch reach. He's a high-pace fighter, pressure striker. He broke Sean Woodson just his volume. He got the submission, but it was his volume that got him into the position to get the submission. He can make some mistakes being dragged into a firefight, which is bad considering he doesn't really have a lot of punching power. He fights from both stances to kind of find different angles, and I like that. He loves his teep kick to the body. He throws a lot of hard kicks to the body. He'll actually throw up a high kick that's pretty fast too. Lacks head movement, keeps his chin high, back straight up, has been knocked out in the past. Not a bad wrestler. He can sneak in a takedown, though he's been taken down himself a lot. Will also jump a guillotine instead of sprawling, which I absolutely hate. Looks for submissions off his back instead of scrambling to his feet. Another thing that I constantly talk about that I hate. Landwehr, the first thing I thought of, I think of Landwehr as a prospect, and then I looked and he's like 32, and I'm like, oh man, he's not a prospect at all. He's extremely aggressive, high output. I compared him to Diego Sanchez in our last preview of just the way he fights. Insanely tough, just keeps coming, throws a jab a lot, nice calf kicks, no defense though. He squares up a lot. I mean, we saw that in the Darren Elkins fight. He got tagged up by Darren Elkins a lot. He's solid in the clinch, weak takedown defense, but can get some takedowns himself. Though he can get taken down, he's so aggressive. He's the opposite. He will work up to his feet. Good sub defense if you do take him down, and he has great cardio. This is a fun fight. This is an insanely action-packed fight. I flip back and forth. And just to keep it going, I'm going to flip back again. Then what my notes actually say. Oh man, I don't even know who I want to take because I'm going to take Erosa by split decision, but this is going to be my fight of the night. I think this fight is going to be so crazy. You know what? I'm going to flip again. I'm going to take Landwehr. So there you go. Just to mess with you, Ben. I'm going to take Landwehr by split decision in a crazy fight of the night, and I might switch my opinion again before the end of the show.
You know what? I was hoping that this was going to be the first fight of the night where we were going to have some dissension as to who was going to win, and you got my hopes up, and then you flipped right back to the guy I'm going to pick because I am going with Landwehr. And really, what you laid out a lot of.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Just because of that, I'll go with Erosa.
Okay. How do you have Erosa to win this?
Split decision.
Outstanding. And still your fight of the night, I take it?
Yes.
You laid out the reasons that I want to pick Landwehr. Erosa, he has a variety of solid skills, and he has skills that make good use of his length and reach, but not only has he gotten knocked out badly a couple times in the UFC, everyone hurts him. And it's for the reasons you mentioned, like his head movement isn't great. He backs straight up. Everybody seems to find his chin sooner or later. Just the question is, do they find it hard enough and often enough to put him away? Maybe this is just stuck in my head because I was on press row, like 12 feet away when Julio Arce just completely erased him with a head kick. But Landwehr is exactly the kind of fighter that he's going to find his chin. He's so aggressive. I would be with you in calling this the fight of the night if I was confident it was going to go past the first round. I'm not confident it's going to go past the first round. Give me Nate Landwehr by first round knockout. And it's not because I think he is enormously better than Erosa. He isn't. It's just the way I think their styles, the way they respectively start fights, line up. I mean, if this goes past the first round, it's anybody's fight. In fact, I'd probably even lean Erosa if he makes it out of the first round without getting knocked out. But I don't have confidence that that's going to happen. So give me Landwehr by first round knockout. The UFC Fight Night 185 prelims move on, and it is a bantamweight matchup between a veteran and an up-and-comer in Eddie Wineland versus John Castaneda. Wineland, the 36-year-old, is 24-14-1 overall. He is 6-8 since joining the UFC off of the acquisition of World Extreme Cage Fighting. He fought most recently last June at UFC 250, where he was victim of one of the more memorably chilling knockouts of the year, getting one-shotted by Sean O'Malley in the first round of that fight. He will be taking on Castaneda. Castaneda, 17-5 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. He did compete way back in 2017 on the very first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won, but back in 2017, of course, not everybody who won instantly got signed to the UFC. So he went back to Combate Americas to labor on for a few more years. He joined the UFC last July and lost a pretty lopsided or one-sided debut matchup to Nathaniel Wood. Nonetheless, Castaneda is a slight favorite over Wineland. He's out there around minus 125 or 130, where Wineland is available at plus 110. I'll just say right off the bat, I think people are fading Eddie Wineland too hard. His record is 6-8 in the UFC, but part of that is that he came in as a bantamweight contender out of the WEC, and he came out, I mean, aside from the Showtime kick, one of the last great highlights that the WEC ever gave us when he slammed Ken Stone halfway to the center of the earth and just, knocked him out. Because of that, he's been fighting pretty much the best of the best since the moment he set foot in the octagon. Maybe people saw him just get lanced by O'Malley and just assumed that Wineland is toast, but I don't think Wineland is toast. I think Wineland is still a UFC quality bantamweight, and I'm not sure that John Castaneda is. I'm a little surprised at the odds, and I'm going with Wineland in this one. Wineland's problem is that his striking style was never going to last. Like, this is exactly what his striking style was going to look like once he got into his late 30s, just hands too low, dependent on kind of like Anderson Silva style head and upper torso movement to get out of the way of punches. Sean O'Malley showed what's going to happen when a serious like phenom type prospect with fast hands runs up against that. But I've not seen anything from Castaneda that tells me that he's going to be able to do that to Wineland. So he's either going to have to win a striking battle with him the old-fashioned way, or he's going to have to try to turn this into a wrestling match. Nothing I've seen from Castaneda tells me that he can do that to Eddie Wineland. Like, Castaneda wasn't even a lights out fighter at the Combate Americas level. I don't think he's long for the UFC. He's not a big bantamweight. He's not rangy. He's not especially athletic. Give me Eddie Wineland by second round knockout. I think Wineland will get the better of the first round, start piecing him up, and he'll catch him with something big in the second round. Eddie Wineland, round 2 knockout or TKO.
Yeah, you mentioned Eddie Wineland's 36 for a bantamweight. That's like being 86. He's very physically strong. Like, that's when I always think of Eddie Wineland. As you mentioned, he's a boxer. He has a very herky-jerky style, but still has some good power. Also has power in both of his hands. He likes to counter strike. I think his hands are still pretty fast, though not as fast as it was in his prime days, which you expect at 36. You mentioned he relies on his head movement because he has good head movement. He keeps his hands very low, has that slip and rip style. He is heavy on his front foot, which is not a good thing in today's MMA because of how important leg kicks, particularly the calf kicks, are. He's open to that. He's a good grappler. He's always been a good grappler, though we hardly ever see it because he likes to box. He wants to throw his hands. Move over to Castaneda, southpaw. Good output. He headhunts with his hands, though. Kind of ignores the body with his hands. He struggled with the length of Nathaniel Wood. And what I didn't like about the matchup against Nathaniel Wood is he didn't really do anything to close the distance. Like, he basically just got outworked from the distance for 15 minutes and didn't try to change anything. That's very frustrating. Well, I said he headhunts with his hands. He does do a lot of body work with his kicks. He loves to kick, loves the body kicks on the orthodox fighter, which Wineland is. Throws a lot of leg kicks, which could be an issue for Wineland. He's a good wrestler, solid in scrambles. I wouldn't call him a great in either position. He is a submission threat, though. He has 6 submission wins. I think this fight is closer than you think, just because I don't trust Wineland at this age, to continue. Especially last time we saw him, he got knocked out brutally badly by Sean O'Malley. But Sean O'Malley would absolutely waste Castaneda. So take that when you say. Castaneda could look for some takedowns, though I doubt he out-grapples Wineland. So I expect this to be on the feet. To me, it's going to come down to Castaneda's output versus Wineland's power. I expect it to be close. I think people will be debating decision. I'm going to lean towards the old man, too. I think Wineland's going to land the heaviest shots, and I think he's going to win split decision. So it's my second split decision pick in a row.
Well, if you're right, we'll have plenty to talk about on the recap. Next up at UFC Vegas 19, it's the lightweights as Drakkar Klose and Luis Pena square off. Klose, the 32-year-old, is 11-2-1 overall. He is 5-2 in the UFC. He fought most recently last March, getting knocked out early in the second round by Beneil Dariush at UFC 248. Pena, the 27-year-old, is 8-3 overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC off of the 27th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He fought twice in 2020, losing to Kama Worthy by third-round guillotine choke back in June. And then in February, he won a unanimous decision over Steve Garcia at UFC Fight Night Benavidez versus Figueiredo 1. Klose is a moderate favorite here. He's out there around minus 190, where Pena is available at plus 165 as the underdog. Keith Schillen, who wins this fight and how?
Well, you mentioned this is one of the fights that you're interested in. I'm actually not. I think this is one of the easier fights to pick. I'll start with Klose. Klose is a counter striker. He's a bit flat-footed, but he throws punches down the pipe. He's got really nice straight right. Really steps in on those shots. He rocked Beneil Dariush, and like everyone remembers the brutal knockout by Dariush, but they forget that he almost knocked out Dariush about 15 seconds earlier. He does throw from his hips a little bit, which leaves him open to a counter. Calf kicks are something that he has added to his toolbox. He likes doing that. He's a very physically strong dude. He's big for the weight class. He's kind of just a brute, and he likes to fight that way. He loves an ugly clinch battle, land elbows in dirty boxing and close. He did so against Mark Diakese. More of a clinch wrestler, body lock takedown guy than a drive through your hips wrestler. When he was taken down, I hate that he gave up his I don't like his fight IQ when he gave up his back against Beneil Dariush. And I think that was his last fight. Though I'll give him credit, he's very hard to submit because Dariush was on his back for pretty much the entire first round. He could not get a submission, which is little feather in your hat when you're going to get someone like Dariush. The other question I have about this one is Drakkar Klose's chin now, because his last fight was Dariush and he was knocked out brutal. So you wonder if he's going to be gun shy, if it's going to have long effects. Muo to Pena, southpaw, works behind a jab, though he does have the tendency to throw one punch at a time. I don't like that. He also lacks power. Like, for someone who's big as he is, you think he'd be a bigger hit harder, but you really haven't seen that. Long push kicks, which is obviously good when you have his length. he avoids attacks by backing straight up, and he also kind of turns his head. It kind of dips his head to one side instead of slipping or rolling with the shots. Wrestling wise, he basic shoots doubles with his long arms, which is smart to do. He's relentless to get the takedown if you stuff it. Though he sometimes doesn't set up his takedowns, he can shoot from really far away because he's a distance fighter who doesn't know you need to close the distance a little before you shoot. If he gets on top, solid top control, especially if he can get you back because of his long legs, he gets the hooks in. It's hard to get out. Or if he gets like a body triangle, it's going to be very hard to get out. He is a submission threat. I think it was his last fight against Comerworthy. Like, though he lost that fight, he actually almost submitted Comerworthy. So go to the prediction. This is my lock of the night. I think Klose is just too physically strong for Pena. I think he gets inside. I think he lands shots. I also think he presses Pena up against the cage for large portions and beats him up there. And if it turns into a grapple matchup, I think Pena is going to use a lot of energy trying to get down Klose. And I actually think Klose could actually maybe win some takedowns. So give me Klose. He's not a big finishing guy, so I hate to do it again, but I'm going to take another decision. But I don't think the fight is going to be close, pun intended.
Yeah, I did say off the top that I found this fight interesting. I find it interesting just because of the implications. If Klose wins, he's a guy that's kind of sneaky on the outside cusp of the top 15. Whereas if Pena won this one, it would be easily his best win in the UFC and a bit of a coming out party for a guy that gets a lot of attention just because of his visual hook. It is not a fight I'm interested in because I think it's going to be an exciting fight or because I think it's going to be a terribly close fight. I'm actually very much with you on this one. 7 fights now into his UFC career. Pena just still feels ultra raw to me. He seemed raw on The Ultimate Fighter and for like his first fight or two after that, like at the finale, and then when he fought Trizano, who I believe Trizano was the guy that won that season. But he just seemed like a guy that had all the potential in the world, but just hadn't really put together any of his individual skills into like a coherent game. He still feels that way, and it's like 2.5 years later. It's almost getting to be shit or get off the pot time for Luis Pena. I don't think his job is in danger. I mean, he's still 4-3 in the UFC. He's never lost back-to-back fights. But if he wants to be more than just another guy that everybody remembers because he has a funny nickname and he looks so distinctive, this is a fight he really needs to win. And he's never beaten a guy even remotely close to Klose's level. I mean, Matt Wiman, we didn't even realize at the time that Pena beat Wiman, like how bad Wyman's second run in the UFC was going to go. Steve Garcia, his last win, just, these are not high level fighters. And in the case of Wiman, not even UFC level fighters. Whereas Klose, his fights are not a whole lot of fun to watch. You'd expect a guy that's like jacked like that just presents like that to be a highlight machine. He really isn't, unless he's losing to Beneil Dariush. But he's just, all I see that Pena does well now, that like he does at an above average UFC level, is he's a good offensive wrestler. He did run into a guillotine in that last fight, but other than that, he's a sneaky good wrestler. I mean, he has the USA Wrestling logo tattooed on him for a reason, but that's not going to be enough against Klose. I don't even know if he'll be able to get Klose down. And if he's just stuck on the feet, like throwing single jabs, kind of throwing teeps up the middle, he's going to lose the stand up to Klose as well. Klose, I don't think Klose has a single finish in the UFC, so I'm not going to pick it to happen against someone in Ross who is pretty tough and pretty resilient. But give me Klose by a unanimous decision, probably sweep of all 3 rounds. And if there's an anti-fight of the night pick, I don't smoke, but this would be my smoke break of the night pick for sure if I did. But yeah, Drakkar Klose in a fight that, as you kind of alluded to, is not close. With that, we reach the final fight in the currently scheduled 9-fight preliminary card of UFC Fight Night 185 in the featherweight division, as Jared Gordon takes on Danny Chavez. Gordon, the 32-year-old New Yorker, is 16-4 overall. He is 4-3 in the UFC. He fought most recently last July, winning a unanimous decision over Chris Fishgold at UFC on ESPN 13, Kattar versus Ige. Chavez, the 33-year-old from Miami, made a bit of a splash last year, debuting in the UFC on very short notice against TJ Brown at UFC 252 and upsetting Brown to win a unanimous decision. Chavez is the slight favorite here. He is currently around minus 140, where Gordon is out there at plus 125 as the underdog. Keith, who wins this one?
Well, this is intriguing. I mean, Jared Gordon's a veteran. He's always a tough out. Not a great athlete, a little flat-footed. His boxing is pretty, I would say, serviceable at best. Nothing spectacular. He makes a mistake of throwing one punch at a time. Michael Bisping also pointed out that he reloads his punches, and if a lot of people don't know what that means in like the boxing sense, that's when you throw a punch and you kind of like bring it down to your hip and you kind of like rotate it back up. Instead of bringing it, when you throw like a punch, it's supposed to come back to your face as fast as you let it go out. He doesn't really do that. He does target the body, and that's just his fight IQ. He is an intelligent fighter. He has some defensive holes though, back straight up, kind of. He does a lot of Andrei Arlovski just covering behind his forearms to block strikes. He's a sneaky wrestler though, and he's a good grappler. Solid top control, good ground and pound. I mean, he dominated Chris Fishgold on the ground. And Fishgold is not a bad wrestler himself. But with Chavez, I'm mostly going to break down him from a little bit of regional film I found, and mostly his UFC debut. But his UFC debut couldn't have gone better. He looked fantastic. He's a counter striker, had really good timing on his opponent's attack, especially in his matchup against TJ Brown. Fast hands, some nice pop. He dropped TJ Brown with a punch. He was throwing everything hard. Lot of kicks, both high and low. He would brutalize TJ Brown with leg kicks, dropped him several times with leg kicks. I don't like that he gets backed up against the cage a little bit when he gets pressured. I mean, TJ Brown, who was not having a lot of success, was able to back Chavez up. Though what I've seen on the ground, he's a good wrestler with some good entries. He showed great takedown defense in his UFC debut against TJ Brown. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Though when I looked at his record, he doesn't have. I believe he doesn't have a single submission on his record, which is very shocking for BJJ black belt. I saw one fight on the regional team where he really gassed out and slowed down, but we didn't see that against TJ Brown. So I don't know which one is correctly to assume. From what I've seen, which I'm not super confident because I haven't seen too much of Chavez, but what I've seen, it looks great. I think he styles on Gordon. I think he's faster. I think he hits harder. I think he's more technically sound. I say he finishes him. Give me Chavez by second round TKO.
Like you, I'm someone that I did not think all that highly of Chavez ahead of his UFC debut. For one thing, he debuted on such short notice that I think everybody in the space who isn't from Florida was just sent scrambling to YouTube. Luckily, a number of his fights from the local circuit in Florida are available on YouTube. And my first thought was that the guys he's doing this to just must not be that high a level. I almost dismissed him because of how good he looked. Just my thought being that, okay, a guy like this skilled and this slick, you know, either wouldn't have those losses he has, or he must just be like styling on really bad fighters. So I did not give him much chance to beat TJ Brown at all. For all the reasons you mentioned, I was proven completely wrong. He looked sensational, and that was on short notice. And nonetheless, didn't seem to have any gas tank issues. And I mean, he's fought 5 rounds on the regional circuit numerous times, and something like his first 8 fights all went to the final horn. So I'm going to say he has enough in the tank to make it work against Gordon, who is, Gordon is still a kind of good mid-level UFC featherweight. But if Chavez is as good as he looked last August, I agree with you. He does kind of style on Gordon. I think he's going to make Gordon look slow and clumsy on the feet in particular. And even if Chavez does get tired, I think he will have 2 rounds banked away by then. But yeah, give me Chavez by decision in a bit of a coming out party for an interesting new prospect, even if he's a 33-year-old new prospect. The UFC Vegas 19 main card kicks off with a heavyweight showdown between the veteran Andrei Arlovski and the up-and-comer Tom Aspinall. Arlovski, the 42-year-old Belarusian, is 30-19 with 2 no contests overall. He is 19-13 with 1 no contest across 2 lengthy stints in the UFC. He is 9-9 with 1 no contest since rejoining the UFC most recently. Aspinall, 27 years old, is 9-2 overall. He is 2-0 in the UFC. He fought twice last year, knocking out Jake Collier in the first round, well, in less than a minute, last July at UFC Whitaker versus Till, then knocking out Alan Baudot in the first round once again at UFC Fight Night Moraes versus Sandhagen. Aspinall is a pretty strong favorite here. He is out there at minus 245. Arlovski available at plus 205 or plus 210 as the underdog. I try not to hop onto hype trains. Not because I'm smart or cool or a great analyst, just because I've been around for a long time as a fan, and then later as a media member, and I've seen a lot of hype trains derailed. I've seen many more derailed than I've seen actually pull into the station. But I am cautiously all in on Tom Aspinall. For a guy that started out as a grappling specialist, just decided to go learn to box and came back as good a boxer as he is kind of shocking. He is a for real, he is a big bodied heavyweight. He is a big dude. He's 6'5", probably cuts a little bit of weight to get to the limit. And he's one of those guys that it's not like he's ripped and chiseled, but you can just tell he's an athlete. He moves with kind of a fluidity that's not that common in a guy that size. Physically, the way he moves, kind of like his fight style is not the same, but it reminds me of Matt Mitrione, where you're he's a pretty big guy to be that light on his feet, is what I think of when I see Tom Aspinall fight. The only real question for me with him is, what's his gas tank like? That's always a question at heavyweight, obviously. It's an even bigger question when it's a big heavyweight who, might walk around at 270 or 275. And Aspinall has not been past the first round in a while. He has not been past the second minute in a while. And so there's always the chance that, if he's fighting a tough fighter, a veteran fighter who takes him past the first round, takes him into the third round, that just the whole bottom falls out of all of this. But I certainly am not going to be a believer in Andrei Arlovski in 2021 to do that. Arlovski's been in this game for over 20 years at this point. He's had probably 3 different career resurrections after 3 career deaths. I mean, how many times have we written this guy off? When you're a heavyweight and the word on you is already at, that your chin is made of glass, and they're saying that about you when you're 27, the chances that you're still going to be fighting as even a borderline top 15 fighter at age 42 are slim to none. He's done it in some of the same way that Alistair Overeem has, but Overeem's fights are still fun to watch, and Arlovski's are not anymore. He's always been I think one of the better offensive boxers in heavyweight MMA. He throws in combination. He knows how to throw all the strikes. He has pop in both hands. but he has gone almost like over him to shelling up and just kind of hiding behind his gloves and forearms a lot more in recent years. And I just don't think that's going to get him out of the first round against Tom Aspinall. Arlovski's beaten a few people recently. You know, he always just hangs on to his roster spot. But the people he's been beating, the Bozer win was a good one, but Felipe Lins was not, that was nothing to write home about. The Rothwell fight would have been a great fight 12 years ago. This is going to look more like the Jairzinho Rosenstrike fight, where all of Arlovski's defensive adjustments that he's made over the last decade just aren't going to be enough for someone with the kind of hand speed and power that Aspinall has. Like I say, if this gets past the first round, it's anyone's fight. Arlovski could just jab him to death for 3 rounds. It'll be a miserable fight to watch. I think Aspinall's going to save us from that. He survives. He advances. He'll be tested at some point, but this isn't the one. Give me Tom Aspinall by first round knockout.
Yeah, I think you hit this right on the head. The deeper the fight goes on, the better chance Arlovski has. But if it's over early, it's probably Aspinall. I'll stop breaking down Arlovski for a second. He debuted back in 2000. It was the same year Tom Brady was a rookie. Why is that relevant? It's not. I just had to get Tom Brady into the broadcast.
So you're picking Arlovski to win, is what you're telling me. That's what the Brady reference is for.
That's it. Yeah. He's the counter striker, boxer, everything you mentioned, high guard. He has tight boxing, those hand speed, which has always been his biggest, strength. I think about the heyday of knocking out Justin Eilers and Paul Bunatello. It was always his hand speed. It has decreased, but it's still probably on the upper half of hand speed for heavyweights. But you mentioned his output has dwindled to a snail's pace at that point, and that's to protect his chin. You said it perfectly. His chin has been a roller coaster ride. It's been gone, then it came back, then it was faded, and then came back, and it's 2 or 3 times now. But also his power is gone. This is a guy that he hasn't had a knockout since Travis Brown 6 years ago. He's had 16 fights since that last time he got a knockout. That's some guys' careers. The low output also helps his cardio. He doesn't gas out, but it's hard to gas out when you don't do anything. And if you get close to him, he's going to clinch you. He's going to clinch. He's a good wrestler, not a great, he's probably not going to take you down, but he can. He's a good grappler. No major holes in his grappling. Now, moving to Aspinall, we should pump the brakes on him a little bit. I mean, his 2 wins in the UFC were extremely low-level UFC heavyweights, though I don't want to take too much away from him because he's got 5 straight finishes. He's a big guy. He's 6'5", and everything you said about him is true. He's quick. He's athletic. Good movement. He's light on his feet. He hits hard. He's a good boxer. He changes stances, which you got to like. He's accurate with his strikes. And you mentioned earlier, he's a grappler. He can mix in takedowns. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's got submissions on his pro and amateur career. I know Arlovski's been on a nice stretch, but I'm just done with him. I think this is the beginning of the end. I think he gets starched. Aspinall's bigger, stronger, faster, younger. I'm with you. We're going to have the same exact prediction. I'm taking Aspinall to knock him out in the first round. And if he doesn't, this could turn into a really, really terrible fight. So let's all just hope. I shouldn't say hope. I don't want to hope someone knocks out Arlovski, but for my pick sake, I'll take Aspinall by knockout.
Next up, it's the middleweights and another of several fights on this card that are postponements from previous cards, as Phil Hawes takes on Nassourdine Imavov. Hawes, the 32-year-old from New Jersey, is 9-2 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of Dana White's Contender Series. He knocked out Jacob Malkoun at UFC 254 last October. Imavov is also 9-2. The 25-year-old is 1-0 in the UFC. He won a unanimous decision over Jordan Williams at UFC on ESPN 16 last October. This fight was originally scheduled to take place just a couple of weeks ago at UFC on ABC1, but has been bumped to this Saturday. And Hawes, same as he was a couple weeks ago, is just a slight favorite. He's out there at minus 125, where you can still get Imavov at positive money, plus 105 to plus 108 a couple of places. Keith, I believe you felt that this was a good matchup for Hawes a couple weeks ago. Have you changed your mind on that?
No, I mean, I don't like that he got injured. That's definitely doesn't make me feel more comfortable, but Hawes is finally living up to the expectations that we saw in him, was put on him early in his career. This guy, as we mentioned, was supposed to be the next John Jones. He looks more like a small Francis Ngannou, I said in the last time. His losses, in fairness, they came to quality competition. He lost to Luis Taylor, PFL champion. He lost to Julian Marquez, who just picked up a win this past week. His other loss was Andrew Sanchez, who's, won tough. He's 32, so he's in his prime. Like, this isn't a prospect anymore. He's in his prime. He's an explosive athlete. He's absolutely shredded, has good power, aggressive, does well to keep his head off the center line. Good hand speed, works behind a jab, powerful leg kicks. He's a very good wrestler. He was a junior college national champion, fast entries, can drive right through someone's sprawl, good ground control, decent back takes, doesn't really conserve his energy, and he carries a lot of muscle, so that's definitely worrisome. The more muscle you have, the bigger gas tank you need. So cardio could be an issue, and I'm still not trusting his chin after Marquez knocked him out, but everything's looking really good. Imavov, I like this kid too. He's only 24 years old, which is scary. He's well-rounded, stays very calm. He's light on his feet. He's a solid counter striker, has fast hands, nice snap on his punches, decent power. I love his step back right hand. I do hate that he drops his hands. He's a good clinch striker. He gets in the clinch. Good entries on his takedowns. Relentless with his takedown attempts. Solid top control. Solid ground and pound. Is a submission threat. He almost guillotined Jordan Williams. This is the fun fight. This is probably the best fight in the entire card. That said, I'm taking Hawes. I feel like he is more of, and I said this last time, so it's going to sound like a broken record when I broke this down. I feel like he's more advanced at this stage of his career. While he is in his prime, Imavov probably isn't. He should be able to stop any takedown attempts and get any himself if he wants to. And on this feet, Imavov might be as technical. He's not as explosive. So I think Hawes might catch him. I says he just keeps turning around his career, and I think Hawes wins, and I think he wins by first round knockout.
This is just going to be one of those nights that we agree on a lot of picks. I also have Hawes by first round knockout. I had him by first round knockout when we talked about this fight a few weeks ago. I agree that Imavov probably has a pretty high ceiling in the UFC, but just simply the time for Hawes is now. Imavov, he is a good technical striker. He throws a variety of strikes, but he prefers to be an outfighter, and he's not super high output. And I think both those are just going to work against him, against Hawes. I think Hawes will be able to get inside, make him uncomfortable, land more and harder shots. If I was confident that Imavov was the better wrestler, I would feel differently about this fight. But I'm not sure that he is, even though he is a very good wrestler. I don't think he's going to be able to get Hawes down, even if Hawes, enters with somewhat reckless abandon. Even if Imavov is hurt and just needs to go for something desperation, I don't think he's going to be able to get Hawes down, at least not in the first round. And like you, I don't think this gets out of the first round. If it goes past the first, I wouldn't say it's anybody's fight. I still favor Hawes, but it certainly gets a lot more interesting. But I don't think it's going to get there. So kind of like I said about, Landwehr versus Erosa, it's not like I feel Hawes is a 10 times better fighter than Imavov. Just the way their styles are going to match up, the spot they're at in their respective careers, it's just going to be Phil Hawes night. If they ran this back 2 years from now, it might look entirely different. But for now, this is Hawes' fight to lose. Give me Hawes by first round knockout, and probably something spectacular. Next up, it is another heavyweight delight, and it is another veteran versus youngster matchup as the ageless Aleksei Oleinik takes on the up-and-coming Chris Daukaus. Oleinik, the 43-year-old Russian by way of Southern California, and I think he's even Ukrainian by birth. Man's got a lot of passports. Anyway, he is 59, 14, and 1 across a storied 2-decade career. He is 8-5 since joining the UFC to relatively modest expectations already in his late 30s. He'll be taking on Daukaus. The 31-year-old Philadelphia native is 10-3 overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC last year. He defeated Parker Porter last August with first-round strikes. He knocked out Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira in 45 seconds last October at UFC Fight Night Moraes versus Sandhagen. Daukaus, the bookmakers are going with, they are not going with age over beauty. Daukaus is a minus 170 favorite. Oleinik out there around plus 150 as the underdog. Keith, who have you got?
Well, first of all, I'm shocked by the line. Like, if you told me one of these guys would be a negative 170 favorite, I would have thought it'd been Oleinik. I mean, this is compared to the guys he's been facing, this is a step down for him, and this is a big step up for Daukaus. I'll start with Oleinik. I mean, I think this is his 75th professional fight, which is insane. He has an unorthodox but somewhat like effective striking style. He's wild though, but he has decent power. He's got like old man strength. He avoids strikes by leaning to the right, which leaves him open to left side attacks, which is a huge issue. But he loves to grab the back of the head and kind of Randy Couture dirty box it, and was been pretty effective with it, especially against Fabrizio Verdum. His chin is a little bit of a worry for me at this point. One, because of his age. Two, because of having 75 fights under his belt, and now he's had some recent brutal knockouts. I think of Walt Harris. I think of Derrick Lewis. He's a good wrestler, though. I mean, he's got those body lock takedowns. Though he isn't like a great wrestler. Like he isn't. Well, I don't know what the word I look for. He's not a perfect wrestler. Like, he got taken down by Derrick Lewis. He got reversed by Derrick Lewis, which is an issue. Like, he's more of a grappler than a wrestler, but his grappling is some of the best ever. He's got 46 submission on his record. That's insane. He's got the record from Ezekiel chokes. He's the only guy who does it. He'll do scarf chokes. He's not only is he a submission threat, but he's unconventional submission. He's not the kind of submission that's easy to train for. And he's also hard to submit himself. I mean, he avoided submissions from Fabrizio Verdum when Fabrizio Verdum had his back. Now, moving to Daukaus, this was not a guy that I believe I'm going to go back to his, our breakdown of him versus Parker Porter. Like, I don't think either one of us was that high on him. But he's been impressive in his 2 UFC fights. And what I think is most impressive is he came into his last fight 14 pounds lighter than he was in his UFC debut, and he looked like a much different guy. He's got pretty fast hands. He's pretty technically sound. He's accurate. He's showed some power that he didn't have in the regional scene, having 2 quick UFC knockouts now. He's always. I mentioned in this last time we were breaking down that he throws a high kick often, though he doesn't land it often. I don't like that he backs straight up, which is a major problem, especially the fact that Parker Porter backed him up a little bit. He's a good clinch striker. He gets clinch. He can beat you up there, elbows and knees there. And if he goes to the mat, he's not a fish. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. As far as prediction, like I said from the beginning, I think Oleinik should probably be the favorite still. He probably submits him, though. I don't show favoritism when it comes to my New England fighters. I show favoritism when it comes to fellow police officers. So even though I think Oleinik will probably win, I'm going to go with Daukaus by first round knockout just because he's a police officer.
Alrighty. Well, we will diverge on this one. I was a little surprised at the odds as well, but I've got Oleinik in this one. Daukaus it's been a nice story for him since landing in the UFC with pretty modest expectations. I mean, We both picked him to beat Parker Porter, I believe, and we were right. But I didn't expect him to be 2-0 coming into this fight, getting a name like Aleksei Oleinik. And it's a thing where Oleinik is definitely on the way down. Daukaus is probably still improving, but 31 by heavyweight standards is a spring chicken. But just the way their specific strengths and weaknesses line up, Daukaus is surprisingly athletic for kind of how he presents. He just, I mean, I don't mean this in a mean way, but he just kind of looks like a big dumpy guy. And he's kind of surprisingly athletic and light on his feet for how he looks. I mean, it doesn't help that he basically like looks like an overweight version of his brother, who's like, I believe, a middleweight. So like, it's an unfair comparison, but surprisingly athletic guy, but not a great gas tank on him. And considering the way Oleinik's gas tank has started to fade a bit as he pushes into his mid 40s, I could see that as a route to victory for Daukaus if he can get out of the first round, get late into the second round, and Oleinik's fading. But Daukaus has often faded in those type of situations as well. So I'm not confident there. And in every other way, this is going to be an enormous step up from the type of fighters that Chris Daukaus has been fighting. I mean, obviously, Oleinik will be the best grappler that Daukaus has faced. But you could make an argument that he's also the best striker that Daukaus has faced, even as dilapidated as he is. And while he can be caught, his chin is not what it once was, and Oleinik made it to this point in his career by being very good about guarding his chin. I haven't seen anything from Daukaus that makes me think he's going to be able to catch him coming in with something perfectly timed like Walt Harris did. Give me Oleinik to win this one by second round submission. I think it'll be a fun fight while it goes, though. Next up, Charles Rosa versus Derrick Minner in a featherweight main card matchup at UFC Vegas 19. Rosa, the 34-year-old Massachusetts native, is 13-4 overall. He is a perfect 4-4 in the UFC, perfectly alternating wins and losses, that is. He fought twice in 2020, losing a unanimous decision to Bryce Mitchell at UFC 249 back in May, then taking a split decision over Kevin Aguilar at UFC on ESPN 10 in June. He'll be facing Minner. The 30-year-old Nebraska native is 25-11 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC last year. He lost his debut to Grant Dawson back in February by second round rear naked choke. He came back and won via first round guillotine choke submission over TJ Laramie at UFC Fight Night Covington versus Woodley in September. Rosa is a slight favorite here. He is minus 190, where Minner is plus 160 to plus 165. Keith, who do you like to win this one?
So this is the weirdest fight on the card. Like I don't get why this is that high on the card. Really, really surprising. I don't know. Neither one of these guys are like future top 15 guys, and I don't know. Anyways, I'll start with Rosa. Switches stance a lot. He has that sideways karate style. He's elusive, good movement. I like that he has a lot of different attacks. Like he has a lot of variety in striking. A lot of it comes from with his kicks. His hands are kind of slow, and he single strikes. He's also open to attacks. I think I mentioned last time he fought because he admires his work a little bit. He's been rocked because of this. Kyle Bochniak rocked him in the past. Shane Burgos, starched him because of it. He also hangs his hands low depending on head movement. He will shoot in for takedown, though he isn't a powerful wrestler. Similar to I forgot who I mentioned was a sneaky. I said sneaky wrestler. He'll surprise you with a takedown. Weak defensive wrestler, though. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, though that might not be the case anymore after what Bryce Mitchell did to him. He has some submission skills off his back. I mean, he submitted Manny Bermudez, who was known for his submission skills. Rosa likes to jump on like leg locks when he's on the ground. And he's hard to submit. I mean, all you gotta do is look at the Mitchell fight. Like Mitchell put him through the wood chipper and could not get the submission on him for the entire 50 minutes. And also, I've always been impressed with Charles Rosa's cardio. Like he really doesn't slow down. Like he can go hard. Move over to Minner. Minner's very different. Minner's a fast starter. This is a guy that's going to come out. I think something like 22 or 23 or 25, something crazy. And like first round finishes. It's insane. On the feet, he's a high output. Also switches stances. Uses a lot of movement. Though his boxing is pretty bad. Like he lacks technique. He throws looping overhand punches. Keeps his chin high. Back straight up. Also, he slips to the same side over and over again, which some high level striker is going to put him out because of that. Throws a lot of kicks. Doesn't have much power. He is a good grappler, though. I mean, he's a former NCAA wrestler, good doubles and single entries, good at winning scrambles. If he can't get you down, he'll just pull guard because he's that confident in his grappling. He also won't fight a takedown. Like if you shoot on a takedown, like he's likely just gonna let you get it down because he wants to get to the ground. I think he has 22 submission wins. He likes to attack the neck. We saw that in his last fight against TJ Laramie. He also will look for, if he's on top, he'll drop down on a leg lock or a heel hook or a knee bar. Though he lost, he actually almost caught Grant Dawson in a submission, and Grant Dawson's a good grappler. Though this shouldn't be on the main card based on these guys' potential, this is an intriguing matchup. I think Rosa's going to have the advantage on the feet, probably a pretty big advantage on the feet. He could win the grappling, but I'm actually going to go with Minner there, and it actually might come out to who gasses out first. But I'm going to continue to pick against my New England guys, and I think Minner's going to get some takedowns on Rosa. I think he's going to win from some fun scrambles, and just because I think he's the better offensive wrestler, so I think he wins a decision, and this is my upset special tonight.
All right, we finally have some dissension, and of course, once we have some dissension, it's me being the square and picking the favorite. I remember looking back at tape on Minner ahead of his UFC debut, and because the guy had like 21 he was like 24-10 with like 21 submissions, and like 19 or 20 of them were in the first round. It was ridiculous, and what I found was, they're very, very big fish, small pond thing to him there. It kind of reminds me of, and I'll go old school here because I know you'll pick all these up. He's not Jason Reinhardt on the bad end, and he's not Drew Fickett on the good end. Kind of in the middle. He's like an Ed DeWeese type, where you look at his record and he's just got like 20 submissions in a row. And it's not because he's a great grappler, even if he is a very good grappler. It's just Minner's a guy with an aggressive guillotine. You said it. Like, even when he's the better wrestler, he will give up the takedown just to snatch the guillotine. And that works in Nebraska. I don't think it will. I say it doesn't work at the UFC level, except that's exactly what he did to TJ Laramie. But he's not going to do it to Charles Rosa. Once they get in the cage together, I think Rosa's he's gonna be the bigger man. I think he might not be any physically stronger than Minner, because Minner is a little tank, but Rosa will be the better athlete. I agree with you that I think he's the better striker. Minner might be the better wrestler. Well, I mean, in a vacuum, he certainly is. He's a former college wrestler, but I don't think it'll make a difference here, because if this goes to the ground, I think it'll be like both men will be happy to go there. And Minner is as happy to pull guard as he is to shoot for a takedown himself. I think Rosa is a better grappler than Bryce Mitchell made him look. Mitchell's just got some weird juju. I think Bryce Mitchell's going to embarrass a lot of respectable black belts before it's all said and done. So I'm giving Rosa a little bit of a mulligan on that one. I think he's just going to outclass Minner. Give me Rosa by a second round submission in this one. Maybe Minner pulls guard with the guillotine. Rosa pops his head out, ends up on top, and goes to town from there. We now come to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 185, a women's bantamweight matchup with some high stakes as Ketlin Vieira takes on Yana Kunitskaya. Vieira, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 11-1 overall. She is 5-1 in the UFC. She fought just once last year, taking a pretty dominant unanimous decision over Sijara Eubanks at UFC 253. Before that, she fought in December of 2019 and was TKO'd in the first round by Irene Aldana. Kunitskaya, the 31-year-old Russian, is 13-5 with one no contest overall. She is 3-2 since joining the UFC as a recent Invicta FC title challenger. Kunitskaya is a pretty substantial underdog. She's out there around plus 225, where Vieira is around minus 260 as the favorite. Keith, is there any upside to the underdog here, or are you going with Vieira?
Yeah, so I do think there is some upside. I do think the line is off a little bit. I guess I'll show my hand. I'm taking Vieira, but like she shouldn't be this massive a favorite just because of the physical tools that Kunitskaya has. Now, Kunitskaya is huge for the weight class. She's a high volume striker, kind of long rangy striker. She, from range, she can outfight. Though she will throw in that spinning back fist. She has that high guard, lots of kicks. Defensive enemy at high guard, throws lots of kicks. If you get in the mid range, she'll start looking for some slicing elbows. She doesn't like pressure, though. Mariano, he was a little too late for her, but in the third round, she started backing Kunitskaya up with pressure. Aspinall just came out third round crazy and floored her with the first punch by pressing her on her back foot. But so we talked about the range, we talked about the mid range, and then all the way in close is where Kunitskaya really likes to be. She loves to clinch. Because she's just a very physically strong person. She'll grind you against the fence. Throwing knees to the body and legs. Good takedown defense, which is funny because it wasn't that case early when she was facing Tanya Evinger and Evinger was taking her down. That's not the same girl anymore. She's got a really good wizard game. If she gets on top, solid top control. Though on her back she did struggle getting Aspinall off her. But what I liked is cardio is good. Like she can fight deep into a fight and she presses hard. Now Vieira is also huge for the weight class. She's a counter striker. I think she showed some improvement in her striking, especially in her last fight. She doesn't have a lot of speed, but she makes it up by being pretty technically sound. She also has very long arms. She uses that well because she works behind a jab, which we saw a really improved jab in the last fight. Her power punches still need some improvement. They're kind of looping, and she throws them from the hip, which one loses power, but also kind of telegraphs. She has some defensive holes, pulls her head straight back. I'm also surprised that she doesn't hit as hard as she does, being how good she is. But the dirty boxing is where she's really good at. She can batter you. Go back to their Kat Zingano fight. She really battered her in their dirty boxing. Vieira is a good grappler, good takedown. She out-wrestles Kat Zingano. She's a judo black belt. She threw Sarah Mann, an Olympic silver medalist wrestler, with a judo throw. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I go back to the top control she had against Kat Zingano. She submitted Sarah McMahon. If you put her on the back, she can scramble back to her feet. The issue, though, could be cardio. She faded late against Kat Zingano, where Zingano made it a close fight. Like I said, I think the line should be closer. I am favoring Vieira. I can see how Kunitskaya could win, especially late if she can get a late surge. If it's a very grappling heavy and Vieira tires herself out. That said, though, I think Vieira is a tough stylistic matchup. She's just as big as Kunitskaya, which is usually one of the advantages Kunitskaya has. She might be able to match Kunitskaya in a long distance kickboxing match. And then if Kunitskaya gets the clinch, I don't know if that's a good idea against someone like Vieira. If she can throw Sarah McMahon, she can probably throw Kunitskaya. So I expect Vieira to get a bunch of takedowns and to win a decision. So give me Vieira by decision.
I'm glad you brought up the Zingano fight because, Zingano herself is a big physical woman, very, very strong. And even she came on towards the end, but Vieira was handling her physically for 2 rounds and change. I look at the way she lost to Irene Aldana, where you mentioned that, she pulls her head straight back. And it was just in a moment where she was trying to reset, guard down, kind of just get her just kind of moving straight back, and just got absolutely nailed and got one-shotted by Aldana. That is something that Kunitskaya could do to her, but she's had that bad of a lapse in that kind of a situation basically exactly once. Kunitskaya is better than the line shows, as you said, but I don't see any real obvious avenues to victory for her here. Her strengths kind of match up with Vieira's strengths, only Vieira's even a little better at them. Also give me Vieira by decision, and maybe it'll be a Zingano type fight where, it's Kunitskaya who's coming on as the fight closes, and maybe she wins the last round, but it is too little too late by that point. And it just, the question going from here as Vieira continues to go up the ladder is, what's it going to look like when she has to get into 5-round fights? And with that, we arrive at the main event and namesake of UFC Vegas 19, Blaydes versus Lewis, as Curtis Blaydes takes on Derrick Lewis. Blaydes, the 29-year-old, is 14-2 with 1 no contest. He is currently on a 4-fight winning streak in the UFC heavyweight division, most recently defeating Alexander Volkov last June. He knocked out Junior Dos Santos in January of 2020, Shamil Abdurakhimov in September of 2019, and took an extremely dominant wrestling clinic style unanimous decision over Justin Willis back in March of 2019. Lewis, the 36-year-old Houstonian, is 24-7 with 1 no contest. He is on a 3-fight winning streak, having knocked out Aleksei Oleinik last August, having taken a unanimous decision over Ilir Latifi last February at UFC 247, and a split decision over Blagoy Ivanov at UFC 244 back in November of 2019. Blaydes is a prohibitive favorite here, biggest favorite on the card. He is at minus 400, while Lewis is available at plus 325 as the underdog. Obviously, we talked about this fight just a couple months ago. Nothing has changed. The dynamic is exactly the same. The one thing I'll say about this fight is, obviously, a lot of analysis is just going to say it's Blaydes' takedowns versus Lewis's knockout power. But in both cases, those avenues to victory are not as easy as some people have made them look. Like, yeah, all you have to do is punch Blaydes really hard in the head, but how many people have actually done it? Just one guy. And obviously, Derrick Lewis is no great chop on the ground, especially off of his back. When he's on top, he's terrifying, but off of his back, he's not, much to worry about. But it's not as easy to put him there as Daniel Cormier made it look. Lewis's takedown defense, for the most part, is actually pretty good, just like Blaydes' chin, for the most part, and his defense on the feet is actually pretty good. Having said that, that is the dynamic. Will Blaydes be able to take down Lewis early and often and either, ride this out, wear Lewis down, or will Lewis catch him with something? Lewis has more than just punches. For a guy who is as big as he is, and I've been in the same room with the guy many times, shaking his hand, the guy is like a chest freezer on stilts. Like, his legs aren't that thick, and his arms actually aren't that gigantic and thick. He's not like Ubereem, but just his torso. It's not even that he's that fat. He is just a gigantic dude. And for a guy that's built like he is, the fact that he throws as many high kicks as he does and doesn't telegraph them, he threw a flying knee against Oleinik. He's always had a pretty good step in knee. He's he's taken to throwing flying knees. For a guy like Blaydes who shoots, Blaydes is one of the few heavyweights who he shoots a blast double. It's there. It's there as a possible avenue to victory. It's not super likely. The most obvious outcome here is, even if Blaydes gets some of the better of the early standing exchanges, Blaydes shoots for a takedown within the first 60 seconds. And even if he doesn't get the first one, he'll get the second or third. And whether this goes for 1 round or 5, it's Lewis on the bottom for most of it. Much as I would like to pick my fellow Houstonian in this one, as much as I can see that he certainly does have avenues to victory, because, yeah, he's not the same type of striker as Francis Ngannou, but he's one of the few other guys in the division that does have that kind of punching power where if he just caught him behind the ear with like one, hard enough shot, he could drop him. Lewis's training regimen is almost an ongoing joke. Like every single fight is the one where he's like, well, my back is finally better. This is the time I'm really in the best shape of my life. But he is now the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts at heavyweight. But long before he was the all-time leader in knockouts at heavyweight, he was already the UFC's leader in knockouts at heavyweight in the 3rd round or later. Even if he looks tired, he still throws hard, and his volume doesn't completely disappear late in the fight. Just ask Volkov. Having said all that, the only real question for me, unless I'm talking about picking a really outside case, is whether Lewis is just tough enough and crafty enough and maybe is in good enough shape to make it to the final bell, or Blaydes just grinds him out. Give me Curtis Blaydes by unanimous decision, probably a lopsided one. Lewis might even win the first round, but by the end of this, it's going to be a rout, I'm afraid. Blaydes big time, Blaydes by decision.
Yeah, so, wow. So I agree with a lot of things you're saying. You made some really good points. You made a good point about only one person catching the chin so far of Curtis Blaydes. And then you also made a good point of only one person significantly out wrestling Derrick Lewis. I think other guys have taken him down. I mean, think of like a little Latifi and different stuff, but to be able to hold him down, being DC, those are very good points. But what I would like to say is, if anybody can match Ngannou's power, isn't it Derrick Lewis? And if anybody could match, Daniel Cormier holding someone down, isn't it Curtis Blaydes? So that's what makes it pretty intriguing that both guys have similar styles to the people who beat them. Now, you talk about Curtis Blaydes. The thing that amazes me is that he's only 29 years old. Like, this guy might not even be in his prime yet, which is really scary. He's really developed his striking recently. He's got a very weird physique where he's got these very long arms. He's starting to land his right hand, hurting people with it. He's got hard leg kicks, big power, but also I feel like his striking opens up and he can land more because everyone's in the back of the mind thinking about his wrestling. So if you sleep on him, he's a heavyweight, and he's a massive heavyweight. Like, he can land one big shot and turn your lights out. That's what happened when I don't know how much he weighs, but what does he weigh? 250, 260-pound guy catches your chin. He can put you out. Now, as far as his wrestling, I said this last time we were breaking down this fight. He might have the best entries in the history of the heavyweight division. Or he at least, if you don't give him the best entries, he's at least the most consistent with it. Like, he's the most who will press that narrative. He'll press the strategy. I mean, you have Randy Couture who had those takedowns. I think of Cain Velasquez. I think of Kevin Randleman. Like, these are all guys. Kevin Randleman is a much better pure technique. I mean, Kevin Randleman is a fantastic wrestler. He's a 2-time national champion, right? Randy Couture went to, was in the Olympics, and so there's guys with better credentials. But I mean the game plan and the willingness to kind of just, this is what I'm good at, and do it. And that's something that really impresses me about Blaydes. Also impresses me is like his top control. Like, he took down Volkov and made Volkov look like a terrible wrestler. And Volkov is not a terrible wrestler or grappler. The other thing that gets pointed out a little bit about Curtis Blaydes is that he slowed down and he kind of gassed out against Volkov. And I think he definitely did slow down. But I do think it's a little Derrick Lewis in him, where he looks like he's tired. He wasn't necessarily as tired as he looked. And also, I think it's more of the outlier than the truth about him. Like, I think it's an exception, in that fight than what we've seen in his career. Now, he hasn't 5-round fights like he did against Volkov, so that could have been it. Move on to Derrick Lewis. I think your breakdown of Derrick Lewis was like spot on. Like I've been trying to, not to copy the same things you were saying. Obviously, big heavyweight. The first thing you think of is his power. You said, I'm trying to think exactly what you said about. You were talking about his grappling being like more technical than it is, and sorry, it was his high. It was high kick. You said his high kick. He doesn't telegraph his high kick, which I agree. But it's funny because his punches, he kind of does. He kind of loops. He does a lot of looping punches, but he's not going to be a volume guy. He just needs to touch you, and when he touches you, he knocks you out. And he kind of fights in bursts, which is perfect for his style. Because like he always fights, whether he's either come at you real quick with a combo, or even when he's on the ground, you take him down, you hold him down, he's waiting, and then it's a sudden burst and he gets up to his feet. So like these things work for him, and it's a way that he can serve his energy. I think you're dead on about his late finishes, but also his cardio. Like I've seen him look tired, but he has ability to fight through his tiredness. Like I think about the Ilir Latifi fight. It was a close fight heading into the last round, and it was Latifi who gassed out and Lewis who pressed on and turned up the volume late and won him the fight. As you mentioned, he's obviously huge, but he's also extremely athletic. You talked about the flying knees, the fast high kicks. This is what he does. I'm gonna disagree a little bit on his wrestling. That I don't think he's a good defensive wrestler. Like I think guys can take him down. Like another one I think it was Aleksei Oleinik. But I'm 100% in agreement of his ability to keep him down. Like Aleksei Oleinik took him down, but he also reversed Aleksei Oleinik. And a thing that doesn't get enough credit for is Derrick Lewis's ground and pound. I mean, that is just like he probably has better ground and pound than Curtis Blaydes has. And Curtis Blaydes has great ground and pound. Derrick Lewis, he's like a toddler who like you give him like one of these toys where they like, or like not a toddler, like a baby. I shouldn't say toddler, like infant baby that you give him a toy and they don't know what to do, so they just kind of bang it on the ground. Like that's how Derrick Lewis is with his ground and pound. Like he just goes like crazy infant baby smashing on you, and and it's like that's scary. So, as far as his prediction goes, man. Curtis Blaydes wants to develop his hands, but the one thing about Curtis Blaydes is he knows who he is, and this is not the guy he's going to test it on the feet with. You said something I totally disagree with. You said that Derrick Lewis might win the first round. I don't think Derrick Lewis wins a round. Like if he wins a round, the fight's over. Like they didn't get to see what the judges scored that round. And I actually think Blaydes early is probably the best bet. And then if Lewis, either he starts them with a big shot quick, or he survives that onslaught, and then Blaydes is kind of tired. He gets up to his feet. It's the sixth time he's going to take it down. He finds a way back to his feet, and then he just catches something. I think that's unlikely, though. What I think is going to happen is I think it's going to look like a lot like the DC fight. I think Blaydes is going to take him down. It's going to be rinse and repeat, and then finally gets to a position where maybe he's pressed against a cage. Maybe it's somewhere where like Lewis will not be able to get out. And I think Curtis Blaydes ends it with some ground and pound. So give me Blaydes by third round TKO with ground and pound.
There you go. All 15 fights from UFC Fight Night 185 broken down by Keith Schillen and yours truly. That takes place this Saturday, February 20th at the UFC Apex. Make sure to check out the SureDog YouTube page immediately after the main event, where Keith and I will have the live recap show. We'll take your questions, take your comments. If you want to make fun of us for the picks we got wrong, we will be there to take our medicine. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy the fights.